Welcome into a live Locked On Lions squad show, post game edition, and we pushed it off as long as we could. Woof. What in the world was that, Bradford Banta?
Merry Christmas from Minneapolis, where the Lions brought the wrapping paper, but the Vikings kept ripping the gifts out of their hands.
One pride. It's the Lions Squad. Everything Detroit Lions every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from the Motor City, the way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. From the roar of the Lions to the next great chapter, the Lions Squad Show starts now.
And here we go. The Locked On Lions squad show does start right now. Post-game edition. Jake Riepma, Bradford Banta on the #1 sports podcast platform, the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's show is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. A day later, December 26th, not the instant reaction show, but my reaction is still the same, Bradford Banta. 6 turnovers? Six turnovers.
I mean,
I'm
especially,
pulling my hair out.
yeah, no doubt. Especially within the last, I'd say, what they say, last 8 games, there've only been a total of 3 turnovers. And the field position that it gave the Minnesota Vikings to pull ahead in this, I would just recap the entire game as an offensive blunder on both sides because both teams were not able to move the ball. But I want to say in 6 of the Minnesota Vikings 12 possessions, it may have been 6 of the 12 possessions started in Detroit Lions, they started in Detroit Lions territory, where Detroit Lions started every one of their possessions in their own territory. So you're playing on a short field with 6 turnovers, and Reichert was on with his. He was on with his kicking, and you can't say it was an offensive showing except for Addison's 65-yard run. That was it. There was nothing else that happened offensively, really on both sides of the ball, that stood out to me. I thought the defense played pretty doggone well, considering who they were going against with Brosner at quarterback. They kept him in check. They kept I think Jefferson ended up getting his 1,000 yards, which he was eventually going to get because they have one more game. He ended up getting it at the end of the game, but it was just a blah game.
Yeah, the Detroit Lions, I'm of the opinion maybe owe everyone an apology for forcing us to, or the NFL for putting that game on Christmas, which listen, we're Lions fans. We're going to be locked in no matter when the team plays. But you plan your Christmas around that S show, as we would say, because it was Jared Goff getting sacked 5 times. I mean, elementary mistakes of fumbling the snap not once but twice, just zero continuity and being on the same page. We'll talk about that, but you know the deal on the Locked On Lions squad show. We're going to break it down offensively, defensively, and what else we've got on tap for today's show. I thought we'd talk a little bit about what's next for this Detroit Lions team, because obviously being eliminated from the postseason with just one more game to play in Chicago, and then an offseason where there are, at this point, what feels like more questions than answers, and certainly a lot to discuss moving into an offseason that none of us anticipated being without the postseason. So if you're up with us on December 26, 2025, go ahead and fire off your comments as well, like Pete999100. I happen to agree, keeping it real simple. Pathetic. And I think that's an adequate way of putting it. It was pathetic.
Dan put it best at his press conference last night. He's going to look at everything. He and Brad are going to look at everything. And it starts with himself. He's got to look himself in the mirror. They have to do an extensive breakdown of the roster, of how they do things. And this is something that we talked about during the season and on various shows on how they go about doing. Let's just start with practice, how hard he practices them. Yes, it makes it, and I talked about it. You start training camp out with, you want to build calluses, and that's where you start, and that's in training camp. And I think he does a good job of that. But there comes a point in time where you do have to harden up the entire team. Now, the fine line that you have to choose is, where do you go too far? And then how do you manage the players? Because you pretty much know who your starters are going to be on both sides of the ball going into the season. I would say out of the 53-man roster, you have a firm understanding of who, let's say, slots 1 through 30 or 1 through 35 are going to be. It's that 36 through 53 that you have to choose wisely, and then that's how you build your depth. And for a couple seasons now, it's come back to bite the Lions in the behind from injuries on the offense and defensive side of the ball, especially on the defensive side of the ball. The last 2 seasons, this year being the secondary, and last year it just being all around. And there has to be an extensive, just overall look at the organization, and I'm talking everything. And Dan and Brad are going to do it. It has to be from how you look at your personnel, how you go about finding your personnel, how you go about managing your personnel. And I'm talking not only roster, but I'm talking administration, training staff, strength staff, equipment staff. I mean, it just,
Nobody's safe.
no, nobody's safe, and you have to look at it. And even, I mean, I talked about it earlier. It was, you look at yourself first. What can I change? That's a question that good leaders always ask themselves. You always ask why, meaning, why is this working, or why is this not working? And then you ask, how is it working, or how is it not working? And then you always ask yourself, even if it is working, what can I do to make it better? You do a deep dive into this, and you do it while the players are away. And this will give you'll have a couple months to do it. Now, granted, there are many things going on between now and the time in April, whenever the players report again. There you have a lot of the Senior Bowls, the Combine, free agency. So all these things have to be laid out, and they have to be done in a timely manner to go about it. And let's not forget, we do have a game next week versus Chicago, at Chicago, to end the season. So you have to motivate the players to play into that. And last I remember, Jake, yeah, we beat Chicago the first time we played them at the beginning of the season at home. Now we're playing them in Chicago, and they're going to be looking to rectify. Chicago Bears are going to be looking to rectify that previous game that we played. It's not a revenge game. It's not a get-right game for the Chicago Bears, but it's a continuation of what we have built through the season, and they're going to view it as the Detroit Lions are just in our way. So let's go play good ball. And the Lions have to be motivated to go and play this game and show what they are all about, and prove to themselves, not to the fans, not to the talking heads or anybody like that, but it's just an internal pride factor that I know the core group of this roster has. It's just it boils down to pride now.
No, you're exactly right, and that's, what I kept going back to in yesterday's game. There was none of that. I mean, very rarely over the course of the Dan Campbell era could you point at a Lions team and say they're playing with no pride, no heart, no desire. And that's a dangerous line to toe as a former player. If you call out a guy's effort, or God forbid, use the Q word, quit. And I'm not insinuating
No.
that at all. There was the lack of execution. But last week I said, man, after that loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers, this team needs a wake up call, like a shake the face mask, wake up call. What are we doing? And I'm at the point now, the wake up call turned into a reset. I think this team needs a mental reset, obviously the physical reset with all of the injuries and everything else that comes with an offseason that you've alluded to. This team, and I shared it with you and Nat in the text group yesterday, that this was the worst they've looked in the Brad Campbell era since year one. And that's going back now to what, 2020, 2021, whatever it
Mhm.
is.
Yeah.
It's going so far back of how far this team has regressed in that one game yesterday, and the painful reminders of where this team used to be. And it feels like the reset, I keep going back to that, is what the doctor is ordering for this team right now. But like you said, there's still one more game.
Yeah, there's still one more game. And, let's just finish the season on a high note. I know it's a short plane ride to Chicago. Hey, let it be a joyous one on the way back. Let's get in this week. Let's put the work in. And guys that are on the cusp of being there or not being there, hey, go show what you can do. Go make a statement. Let this be a statement game heading into the off season, and really, let's go play your game. Go play your game, and it's just frustrating from being on both sides. From me being on both sides and just talking about being a former player and a former coach, just to see him go out and perform this way. And I just keep going back to what changes need to be made. How can we get the mojo back? Yeah, health creeped in, and it creeped in bad spots this year. Talking about offensive line, talking about secondary, because you need to protect golf, and you need to patrol the defensive backfield with authority. And if those receivers come in there knowing that, hey, this is not a safe place to be, those arms tend to shorten up a little bit. And if golf drops back knowing that he's going to have to hurry his throw, he's not going to make, he's going to throw the ball quicker. And I think it showed last night on a couple of those throws. I know one that truly stood out to me was one to Amon-Ra. It was over the middle. Amon-Ra was just coming out of a break. And, golf threw it, and he was breaking in. Golf threw it before he made his break, and he let him just a hair too far. Amon-Ra was just able to get his fingertips on it, but it fell incomplete. That's the aggravating part. Usually in seasons past, meaning the last couple of seasons, those passes have been completed and they've been converted to first downs. And that's one of the things that the Lions were unable to do, was just convert on those third downs. Now, granted, the Minnesota Vikings defense with Brian Flores, he brought the house. It just seems like if they were blocking with 6, Minnesota brought 7. If they were blocking with 7, Minnesota brought 8. And they just sent one more rusher than we had blockers to account for. And that was the difference in last night's game. Now, you flip it around, we ended up with, how many sacks did we end up with? I believe 5. I believe it is. Let's see. No, we ended up with 6. Golly, I'm drawing a blank here. So, yeah, we ended up with 6 sacks. Hutch had 2, Muhammad had 2, Anzalone had 1, Williams had 1. And we were all over Brosner as well. But it boiled down to field position. And with the Minnesota Vikings starting in Detroit Lions territory pretty much half of the time, it just made for a short field. And whenever you have a kicker like Reichert coming in, and he was money. And so was Bates, but Reichert had more chances, and he alone outscored the Detroit Lions last night.
It's just crazy to say, and crazy to, I was thinking before we hopped on here, just what's the most shocking part of this all? Is it the 6 turnovers? Is it the 5 sacks? Whatever it is, we're going to break it all down next because we're going in the deep dive on the offensive side of the ball. Stay with us, as painful as it might be. This is the Locked On Lions post-game show right here on the Locked On Lions Squad Show. Today's episode of the Locked On Lions Squad Show is brought to you by Game Time. That's right. Listen up, my friends. You know that the holiday season are here and the NFL is in full swing, and there's nothing like being at the game, the crowd noise, the energy, and cheering alongside other fans. Watching at home is great, but being in the stadium hits a little bit different. The frustrating part has always been getting tickets, waiting and dealing with the login screens and watching prices change right at checkout. That's why the Game Time app gives you the advantage and gives the advantage back to fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing NFL tickets and experiences in just a few taps. You pull up the Game Time app, check out upcoming NFL games, and the one you want to go to, that's right, boom. The app is incredibly intuitive. Browsing, comparing, and buying tickets takes just minutes. One of my favorite features is the view from your seat before you purchase. It's a high-res photo, no grainy, shady business going on. There's no surprises. And oh yeah, the zone deal stood out too. You pick the section, Game Time picks the seat, and you save even more. And don't forget about the Game Time guarantee. Knowing that the tickets are backed by that Game Time guarantee gives you the real peace of mind. So take the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use that code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL, $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code Locked On NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today and get back to being there live. Today's episode of the Locked On Lions Squad Show is also brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast, and one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight. Live betting is the best. And when the game starts to shift, oh yeah, it's a receiver getting hot. Maybe a defense is tightening up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump in at the exact moment. Live spreads, money lines adjust instantly. Player props updates as guys heat up. And oh yeah, you can bet next touchdown score, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Here we go, back with you alive. Locked On Lions Squad Show. Jake Riepma, Bradford Banta. The Lions eliminated from playoff contention, 23-10, the final in this one. Maybe we start with the only touchdown for the Lions. Our boy Isaac Tesla going up and making a catch in traffic. He elevated for that one, rising up, showing off the vertical. And white man can jump in this instance. So how about that? And starting with a little positivity, Bradford Banta.
Yeah, it was great to see him do that. I think he rectified the situation from last week with a very similar throw that Goff threw to him, and it was nice to see the Lions cap that. Was it a 9-minute drive? I
Oh,
believe it
yeah.
was.
I think that was the 18th play of the drive. Something
Yeah,
insane.
it was 10 minutes, 10-minute drive, and I thought that was the statement drive of the game for the Detroit Lions, and kind of the only drive of the game for the Detroit Lions, truth be
Yeah.
told. But it was good to see Tesla get a little bit more involved with the offense. He's going to have to take that momentum moving forward and learn from it. There's a few things that he's done this season that definitely opens your eyes up, but he's going to have to justify being a third-round pick with this in the seasons to come to really, hey, I belong here. And I think he's going to do that. They've done a good job of getting him involved, not only on the offense, but also in special teams, getting his feet wet. And it's definitely been a learning season. The biggest jump that he's going to make is from season 1 to season 2. And he'll be able to be in the complex as much as he wants to watch the film and learn from the veteran players. Not that he hasn't been doing that this year. The veteran players are now comfortable with him being around. They understand his personality. They understand what makes him tick. And, hey, guess what? Now he's going to be a veteran player. So he'll be one of the guys. And it's going to be up to him to just build off of what he's proven this season. And it was fun to see him cap that drive off with the touchdown and going up. And really, probably the primary reason they brought him in here was to be a red zone threat. And it was fun to see that drive put together. You just wanted to see more of it during the game.
No, absolutely. And the easy transition next and kind of scream into the microphone, yell at the TV like we all were, was the offensive line and Goff getting sacked 5 times, the 6 turnovers. But at the same time, that's what we do have to examine and try to determine why that happened. The easy answer, again, the inability to block the opposition. Football is a very, very simple game: block and hit. The team that blocks better and the team that tackles better usually wins, and that was the Minnesota Vikings in every aspect. But was there anything that I kept trying to rack my brain of, other than just guys physically getting beaten consistently at the point of attack? Is there anything else that you looked and attributed to yesterday's, piss poor performance to?
Well, and we're, since we're talking about the offensive line, yes, there was. You have to look at who was up, who was down. So Decker was down, Skipper was in. Glasgow was dressed, but he didn't play. And that alone tells me that they weren't planning on playing Glasgow at all. And it was just, reason being was just he's still hurt. And that just tells you how hurt Decker was probably last week, because there was a couple of times that Skipper and Equibon Or is that how you pronounce it? I apologize for the
I'm not
sound.
100% sure,
So,
but
but anyway, they got overwhelmed. They got out athleted. Let's just say that. And with Flores with as much as he brings pressure, we talked about it earlier in the program. He would seem to always bring one more than we had blockers for. And what we call that in football terminology is just green dogs, where a certain player has, let's say, a tight end or a back, and he's going to rush. And if the player he has man to man blocks, then he continues to rush, but he still has that tight end or that running back man to man. So it boils down to really rushing 6. You'll always outnumber if you rush 6 that are rushing to get to the quarterback. You rush the other guys to keep the running back or the tight end in protection. And they're just grabbing the running back or the tight end. So he brought the house a lot. And they ended up getting home to Jared Goff in a way that he either was sacked or he rushed his throws. And it just happens. And I think we can start with the opening drive. So the Lions were forced to punt on the opening drive. Why? Because they were called for a false start by the center. Now, the actions by the center, whenever they showed it on replay, and it didn't stand out in real time to me, but they said that he had an abrupt movement, and it was a 4th down play, and they were going for it on 4th and short. I think it was like 4th and 1 or 2, somewhere around there. And let's say it was probably 40 plus 45 yard line, plus 46, somewhere around there. And they were called for a false start. And it's because of the abrupt movement by the center. And that just kind of set the tone for the entire day. But that is one call that I disagreed with with the calls that were made. But that kind of set the tone where, okay, now it's 4th and 6, 4th and 7. Now we have to punt the ball. And things just did not pick up until we had the 10-minute drive at the end of the second quarter. And because you had let's just break it down drive by drive. So you had the quick snap, which turned into a fumble on the next drive. That turned into a touchdown.
yeah.
And then we had the Gibbs fumble. And that ended up being a punt. And then we had the Tesla touchdown, and then you had end of half. So, and then you get into the interceptions, and those led to field goals. And then you had the sack fumble led to a punt. We punted, they punted, and then we had the field goal, which led to, after the field goal, this was the only time that the Minnesota Vikings had a long field, was whenever we kicked off. And then that's where Addison turned it into a 65-yard. I believe he got up to 22 miles an hour.
Yeah,
whenever he was running, he was moving. There's no doubt about that. But the quarterback center exchange, whether it be out of shotgun or whether it be up under center, was a cause for concern yesterday. And it proved to be fatal whenever you're trying to come from behind. The Lions were trying to do pretty much all game long.
Yeah, I want to go back to that quick snap, the first fumble of the quarterback center exchange, because the play before that, I thought this was a nothing burger challenge, and Kevin O'Connell looks like a genius after that, because I'm watching it thinking, what okay, even if he does win this challenge, okay, now it's, what, 2nd and, half a yard, and he sees something, someone on their staff sees something clearly enough for it to be reversed, which it was, and lo and behold, the very next snap, they turn it over. So, and I think our show makes a conscious effort to be fair, to tip the cap when the opposition has a heady play or something, and shows, a really smart move like that. But that couldn't have worked out any better for Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings. Kudos to them on that.
Yeah, because I have it written down. I have it written down in my notes is bad challenge by Minnesota Vikings with
Yeah.
3.5 to go in the first quarter, for a ball spot in the Detroit Lions territory. Why?
Why? Yeah.
And then overturn, quick snap. Van Ginkel
Mhm.
recovered the fumble, who always seems to be around the ball.
You're not kidding.
And you brought up a very good point, Jake, and I was just like, it just didn't make any sense at the time. And he came out smelling like since we're the two thorns, and since Nat's not here, Kevin O'Connell came out smelling like a rose.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
It was, obviously not, you turn the ball over 6 times, you get sacked 5 times, you're not gonna win a lot of games. But when that moment happened, I kinda did one of those look around like, "Oh boy, is it gonna be one of those days?" And it was one of those days, no doubt. But the inability to run the ball again, just like the game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, was very, very much prevalent with this Lions offense. And we've talked about the offensive line, so I want to shift it to some the skill guys with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. How concerned are we that the Sonic and Knuckles dynamic duo that we loved and had so much fun discussing over the last couple of years is just hit such a lull? And is it as simple as just, okay, the offensive line is not giving them any room to run, but at the same time, with both of their dynamic, electrifying playmaking ability, you would think that there'd still be sometimes they could, turn lemons into lemonade or whatever the saying is.
yeah, it does happen, but you have to have at least a crease,
Yeah.
and I was talking to a couple people last night, and why you have Jared Goff reversing out and this was down near the goal line. You have him reversing out. We have Montgomery running to the left, and you have him reversing out, and Montgomery's lined up at 8 yards. And let's say the ball is at the 2-3 yard line, and he's lined up at the 10 or the 11-yard line. And Goff is reversing out, but you still have to cover that 8 yards to get back to the line of scrimmage. Just rethinking things. And I am by no means an offensive genius, but line up at 6 yards and don't reverse out, and let's just go mano a mano and duo the thing. And I know it takes time to develop up front. I understand that. And you're in a goal line type situation. It's just, give me some quick hitters. Those type of plays just seem like they're slow in developing
Right.
whenever you're reversing out.
Especially when the offensive line is struggling to
That's
even give up a crease. Like, give them a chance. Don't ask them to block and hold for however long it takes if we could get them to come from 8 yards, like you said.
yeah. And that's the aggravating part. And I just wish, and I've stated this before on the program, get both of them out on the field at the same time.
Yep, we didn't
And
see it.
let's go 22. Let's go 12 personnel. Where we have one tight end, 2 backs, or 21. Excuse me, 21. And or 22, where you have 2 tight ends, 2 backs, and possibly 1 wide receiver. It's a lot of things have to be looked at. this offseason, but we still have one game left to go this season versus the Chicago Bears in Chicago.
That's right. Let's talk a little defensive side of the ball when we come back on our post-game edition of the Locked On Lions Squad Show right here on the #1 sports podcast platform, the Locked On Lions Locked On Podcast Network. Back in just a second. This episode of the Locked On Lions Squad Show is brought to you by our good friends at Prize Picks. All right, this episode, that's right, Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this season. Whether you're following the NFL, NBA, or both, there's no better time to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried it yet, Prize Picks is the simplest way to play. You just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere in Prize Picks operating states, and that includes California, Texas, and Georgia. I've been using Prize Picks during football Sundays and NBA tip-offs. It keeps everything exciting. I just choose my favorite player, and I pick more or less. And oh yeah, the app has the new stacks feature, which is a game changer. You can now pick more on the same player's points, 3-pointers, and assists in the same lineup if you think that player's feeling hot. Plus, if one of your players leaves early with an injury, the injury reboot saves the lineup from a loss. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL, for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Let's jump into the defensive side of the ball as the Lions lose to the Minnesota Vikings 23-10. And that means they lost to Max Brosmer-led Minnesota Vikings. Boy, does that one hurt to say out loud. Max Brosmer. But anyone who watched the game knows it wasn't the Vikings offense by any means. I mean, their defense played phenomenal. We just discussed it. But this Lions defense showed their teeth at times, especially early in this one. Aiden Hutchinson getting into it, Muhammad with a couple of sacks. And, again, I'm not going to take any moral victory laps for slowing down a Max Brosmer-led offense by any means. But when you look at maybe, things that aren't as painful to watch in terms of the film in this one, the Lions defense would certainly performed better than the offense.
Yeah. I would sum it up like this. I'd say the defense did its job early, kept the game tight, but late in the game, they ended up cracking just with the explosive play, and that was kind of the dagger or the straw that broke the camel's back. And whenever you give an opponent short field position to put points on the board, these guys are good enough, no matter whether it be the third or fourth quarterback on the roster, they are going to be able to put the ball in the end zone or put the ball between the sticks, meaning kicking field goals. And that's what the Minnesota Vikings did last night. They were able to obviously score more points than the Detroit Lions, but they also took advantage of the situations that the Detroit Lions presented to the Minnesota Vikings. And they put it in, they turned it into points.
How simple as that. Individually speaking, I thought the secondary held up decently with the game plan that Calvin Shepard put forward with getting pressure. And I thought there was at least on defense, and maybe this is too much of a leap, but there was at least still an edge and an energy, and again, any defensive guy will tell you, you fly around, you gang tackle, and that's something that visually you can equate to effort, edge, playing with a swagger type of thing. There's none of that on offense because you have to execute, and that edge and swagger and everything else comes from big plays versus on the defense of just the different result of what that looks like. But I did think there was at least some of that we didn't see the week prior against Pittsburgh. And again, quality opponent has a lot to do with that.
It has a ton to do with it because the defense held them to 23%. They were 3 for 13 on third down, meaning the Minnesota Vikings. They did fail in their red zone attempts in their goal to go. The Minnesota Vikings were 100% in that. But total net yards, Minnesota Vikings only had 161 total net yards. Well, whenever half of your drives are starting in opponent's territory, your total net yards are going to be down. But they were able to hold them to field goals, and really the interesting stat that I found throughout all of the stats that you can look up and all this kind of stuff, talking about passing, and they held the Minnesota Vikings to 0.1 yards per play. And I'm just like, I saw that stat and I was like, is that right? And it was. So, because they had 51 yards, I believe it was. But it was yards per pass play was 0.1. So I think that may be a record set by the Detroit Lions defense, and they can hang their hat on that if you want to, if they're trying to look for something. I'll go back to, because you keep touching on this, or we keep touching on this, they have to learn how to get off the field. And just with the drive extenders, the holding, I believe Yassine ended up having two or three penalties that ended up giving the Minnesota Vikings a first down. And it puts them in field goal position, not necessarily touchdown scoring position, but at least field goal position. And that's where Will Reichard's able to come in on a fourth down and convert to 3 points. And that's all you're looking to do is put points on the board. And that's what the Minnesota Vikings ended up doing last night or yesterday afternoon, was just putting points on the board whenever the opportunity presented itself. And they came out victorious.
This question I like from Rosemary319, although we got to work on the spelling a little bit here, but if you're watching on the YouTube, but for the audio version here, Shepard has to be better with the scheme. I don't know about that necessarily yesterday in particular, especially given with the personnel he's working with. I thought schematically it was as good as the Lions defense had looked in a while.
I couldn't agree with you more. Schematically, they did well. Did they ever come out and say what Anzalone did for his injury? Did you hear anything? I did not hear anything as well. So it'll be curious to see what his situation is going to be moving forward, talking about this week versus the Bears and whether or not we see him there. I thought, Jack Campbell came out and played a whale of a game. It was a typical Jack Campbell day, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And he went out and did his thing. He ended up with 6 tackles, and with the amount of players that we have going to the Pro Bowl, I believe that they highlighted those guys last night, and rightfully so. Those individuals are playing well. Now, I would imagine if you go to each one of those players and say, hey, would you give up your Pro Bowl nomination to go to the playoffs? I think each one of them would say yes. They would each give up their Pro Bowl nomination and, hey, let's go to the playoffs.
100%. Something I want to cover here in the final segment is, the decisions that this Lions team has to make with some of the pending free agents at the conclusion of this season. When you brought up Alex Anzalone, I think that's probably one of the biggest names on the list. Guys like DJ Reader, Khalif Raymond, Amik Robertson, all those, and a few more. So that's going to be heavy on this front office's mind. And one, like we keep saying, one more data point, one more opportunity, one more Sunday, and everything else at Soldier Field in Chicago. So let's go ahead and tie a bow on this edition of the Locked On Lions Squad Show next, right here on the #1 sports podcast platform, the Locked On Podcast Network. Final segment of the program, Jake Riepma, Bradford Banta, right here, Locked On Lions Squad Show. If you're watching live, we appreciate that. And you can be sure you can't count on the Lions offense. You can't count on much when it comes to the Lions, but what you can count on, my friends, is today's show will be available on the audio only form and the #1 sports podcast platform. I will make sure of it. There's no other way to put it. You're getting today's show in the audio only form, Bradford Banta.
You know what? That would be something I would call up FanDuel and place a bet on, because I know that is a sure thing.
That's right.
And it's going to be up very shortly after this show is over.
That's right. But I do see the comment, where's the lovely Natalie Kerwin, the sideline reporter for the Detroit Pistons. She's got the West Coast trip. The Pistons have been on a roll. I believe they started their West Coast trip 2-0. And Nat is the way it works with the rotating sideline reporters, whether it's her or Johnny Kane, she's with the team, and we appreciate her commitment to the sideline reporting gig with the Detroit Pistons. And I was telling Bradford, we also saw, and I can't wait to ask her about this, that she was able to get out on the slopes in Park City and enjoy some skiing. We know she's a Hall of Fame skier from Milford High School. So there you go. Shout out Natalie Kerwin.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So good for her. Happy she's been able to do that. And we're going to have to get, like we talked about, we're going to have to get a Locked On Lions Squad Show skiing event going at some point. So
yes,
I'm looking forward to it.
100%. All right, let's wrap up with what's next. I put that on the header if you're watching on YouTube. What's next with this Detroit Lions team? I've used the term reset, and I think that would be healthy moving forward. What exactly does that look like? I kick it to the 20-year NFL vet that would have better insight on that than me, Bradford Banta.
So you say what's next. So we have to look back on how we got to this point. And really kind of this game was really a microcosm of the season. And it was control without closure. And we were able to control a bunch of things, but we just weren't able to put points on the board because of our own mistakes. And it just kind of defines the season. And what I'm talking about is turnovers in critical moments, inconsistent run game, red zone scarcity, and then you go and you win the stat sheet, but you're not winning on the scoreboard. And that's kind of the season defining whenever you look yourself in the mirror and you're like, okay, where did everything not go wrong, but where can we improve? This is where I would start. And so you have to, like we talked about earlier in the show, is look at everything from top all the way down to the bottom in the organization, over at Allen Park, at Ford Field, the way we go about doing our business. And it's important to be completely honest. And I think this is where Chris Spielman comes into play. And we haven't talked about him much on the show, but he is the special assistant to the owner, GM, and head coach. And he brings an outside view inside the organization. And I've talked to Chris a couple times, and he is about as football can be. And he will be brutally honest in his assessment of the organization. And I'd be interested to see what he has to say. And we'll never be privy to those conversations. As well, we should not be privy to those conversations. It's show me by your actions. And I'm talking about the actions inside the organization that are let out to the public, and what kind of roster moves are made, what is changing in the organization. That's what's going to be important moving forward.
Oh, you're absolutely correct. And I'm glad you brought up Chris Spielman. I don't think, and I'm guilty of it just because we go Brad Holmes in this front office, but Chris Spielman is such a pivotal part of not only the future of this team, but I think deserves a lot of credit and recognition for bringing this team, up from the ashes to where they are now. But the draft is always something that's fun to talk about. We will have plenty of time to do exactly that. But before that, there's one more game against the Chicago Bears, who are eyeing an NFC North title. Never did I think I'd utter those words in 2025, especially after the Lions. Week 2, remember week 2? 52-21, just a complete domination of the Chicago Bears from the Detroit Lions at Ford Field, but man, does that feel like a distant, distant memory.
It's because it was, or it is. It is a distant memory. You're talking, 17 weeks ago, 16 weeks ago. So it's been a while. It's been a while. So you're talking 4 months? Yeah. So everybody's aged since then. And some age like fine wine, some age like sour grapes. So, you pick which one you have aged like. So but it's good. I'll be curious to see the product that's put out on the field for the Detroit Lions this coming week, and what kind of fight that they show. And knowing Dan, it's going to be a competitive team, and knowing the players, they want to go into the off season with a decent taste in their mouth. It's not going to be the best taste in their mouth, but they want it to be a decent taste in their mouth by finishing the season with a victory.
Yeah, and it has to be in the obvious conversation piece to this one that we'll touch more on in our preview show against leading up to Week 18. But the Ben Johnson piece in his first year, tip of the cap, and I'm guilty of trying to maybe minimize is the wrong term, but at least talk through the replacement of Ben Johnson that this Lions team had to implement over the last season with John Morton and with Dan Campbell calling plays now. Obviously, that transition didn't necessarily pass with flying colors, and Ben Johnson in year one deserves a ton of credit, and I think he's getting a ton of credit, obviously, but has that offense playing at a high level. And I will have all season said we'll see how real this Bears team is, but here we are in December 26th, and they look pretty real.
Yes, they do. So how do we know they look real? Because they have a seat at the table for the 2025 season playoffs. And once you get in, let the cards fall where they may, because you never know what's going to happen. It's going to be an interesting time, especially this playoffs, and you look at the teams that are eliminated, and you're talking about a changing of the guard. And what I mean by that is not having Kansas City in the playoffs for the first time in 8 years, I believe it is
10, I think.
10. Okay. I don't know what it is, but you're going to have a few surprise teams take hold, meaning the Patriots are playing well. The Broncos are playing well. What can Sam Darnold do in the playoffs with the Seattle Seahawks? Can he finally kick that piano off his back and come through with a playoff victory? Can Matthew Stafford rectify the Los Angeles Rams into a deep run, impossible Super Bowl berth? And then you jump over to the AFC side of the ball, where the Indianapolis Colts looked like they were the belle of the ball at the beginning of the season, and then they ended up having quarterback issues. Joe Burrow with Cincinnati, they looked like they were going to be the belle of the ball as well in the AFC. And then Joe Burrow ended up getting injured. And now on the AFC, believe it or not, the Carolina Panthers. I mean, well, that's NFC. Carolina Panthers are showing themselves to possibly be a playoff team. The Texans, Houston Texans are in the playoff picture. So it's going to be an entertaining playoff run in the month of January going into February leading up to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I'd throw in Jacksonville as well with Julian Cohen in his first year. We all laughed at him in his press conference when he was wide-eyed going, Duval. And we're like, who is this guy? And turns out this guy can coach a little bit, and he's got Jacksonville. I mean, he's a coach of the year candidate. So speaks to the parity. Lions certainly, as from our lens, it's been a bummer of a season, but there's still a lot of really compelling storylines. So let's wrap this one up. I know Bradford, you're hitting the road today. A little long drive back to the great state of Michigan, and I have got to get this audio version up and ready. So wherever you get your podcast, you can listen to this Locked On Lions Squad show.
Oh man, I just hope everybody had a great Christmas yesterday, and look forward to speaking with everybody next week.
That's right. We will be back to a more regular schedule with a Sunday game. How about that? So we'll have our preview show on Thursday. Natalie Kerwin should be back. We believe so. So we'll keep you updated on that as well. So for the 20-year NFL vet Bradford Banta, I'm Jake Riepma. Thanks so much for tuning into this edition of the Locked On Lions Squad Show. Make sure you like today's video. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel, and we will see you next time.